All right, ladies and gentlemen, happy, this is the second cut of the year, but happy 2024. I'm back with the man, the myth, the legend, K. Lou, and this is acquiring and operating Micro SaaS. Obviously, that's our mission. And this is a little bit of a change from the typical programming. We are jamming on a portfolio performance and strategy report. So looking at mainly Q4 23, which is the third quarter of our holding period for our portfolio company. And the second quarterly sprint, so to speak, like up until this point, we usually treat the first quarter, maybe two, in 6-week sprints where we're building capabilities, doing stuff, and then we pivot to more conventional quarterly operating models. So this is the second one of those. And I'm super jazzed to dive in. How you doing, Kev?
I'm doing pretty good. Like you mentioned, it's the start of the year. Everything has felt like it's been flowing so far. So I'm really excited to dive in, recap the performance for everyone, and then just talk about what we're setting out to do for this year.
I love it, my man. All right, cool. So in terms of a table of contents or an agenda, if you will, there's kind of two streams. One is going to be very much kind of a reflection and diagnosis of the quarter. What were the main achievements? And then zooming back and just looking at the numbers. What story do we see there? We'll look at MRR, active users, and revenue. We've also got some manual charts that we've cobbled together for this cut because there's obviously some nuance in this firm, which is often the case in Micro SaaS. So there was a conversion to a new payment platform, prepaid subscriptions that weren't traditionally kind of monthly or annual, all that fun stuff. So we'll talk about how we adjust for that accordingly so we have a good handle on where the business is at. And then we'll look at core performance metrics as well. So this is kind of more funnel related activities. Then we will look on an OKR by OKR basis about execution. We obviously have our own methods for that. And then we'll shift gears and look forward. Obviously, we want to start in context of how we're pacing against Y1, and then a sneak peek, which I rounded out a little bit after our meeting today, but a sneak peek, if you will, on Q1 24 objectives. So we'll end with our I guess our viewpoint very much toward the future. That sound all good with you, Kev?
Gucci gang.
All right. Well, let's jump in. Highlights, baby. So main achievements. It's funny, right? Like we always want to be critical, but as we kind of, we were super critical, obviously, in our team setting. And then when I went to write this up, the truth is the truth, right? Like Twain said, if you're telling the truth, you don't have to remember anything. So it's a little buzzy, baby. But I think at the top, record growth in MRR. So we grew MRR from $19,014 to $20,819. So that was about a 9.5% increase in MRR. And we increased average revenue per user, aka ARPU, which is probably the least fun acronym to say out loud. We took that from $36 to 41, so almost a 14%
Yes, sir.
increase in our ARPU. And obviously, yeah, no doubt, these are both a function of the new pricing and monetization scheme. So, woo, giddy up. I mean, I think that's one where, it's funny. I was looking at it and it's like, if you've got one trick, like you or like what, if you know that it's one lever that you get to yank one time, or I guess you can't yank it more than once a year, that tends to translate towards super ambitious goals. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
50% increase in MRR from our new pricing. And it's like, and we'll talk, I think we were shooting for 15%, but damn. I think that was productive. And I think for sure pricing and monetization, I have a whole new appreciation for it. Like as a former CRO, pricing was, you inherited pricing more often than not. It was so entrenched. You didn't really have the latitude to tweak pricing beyond a certain degree. Required a lot of collaboration between product, between finance, et cetera. So I was kind of like, the product is what it is. The price is what it is. Let's get distribution and acquisition channels and grow this thing. And that's definitely a limited scope. So I'm like, pricing and monetization is, it's a dark art, and it's something that all of us need to study. Annual pricing plans. Was that useful for us, Kev? Did that drum up some cash flow that we can invest in a bunch of different stuff?
Ooh, it drum up enough cash flow that we can use to reinvest into the platform to keep our product releases consistent for our user engagement.
Mm. But right, this is the college like wah wah wah.
Yep, 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 yep. So what
So
would you do with 20K in free cash flowing just out of
uh,
nowhere?
there you go, there you go. So I mean, it's like a kind of an estimate. So we just looked, and obviously the mechanism here was annual pricing plans. So
Hmm.
that has kind of the expected impact where you take the annual payment and you basically amortize it across a monthly basis, and that translates into monthly recurring revenue, which is like the most tried and true heuristic for like at least small mid-sized business SaaS firms, because it's like contracted auto renewing revenue, which is about as durable and predictable in the business world as it gets. And then you have
Hmm.
ARR, which in a more enterprise kind of tech environment is even better because those contracts are locked down for a year at a time and those auto renew. That's less of kind of an auto renew motion like you'd see in SMB. But anyway, we offered annual plans, and usually the
Hmm.
trade-off is a discount. So if you buy an annual plan, you get 10, 15, 20% off what would typically be the monthly price. We all see these incentives just about in everything that we buy as everyday consumers. But that put together, that gave us 20K, give or take, in free cash flow, which was a beautiful little shot of oxygen into our scuba tank. So that was happy
Much
days.
needed.
And then I think the big thing where we're sitting here is like, hey, we changed pricing, and as we'll allude to, we got into our first substantive releases on the product roadmap. It's a lot of change. Humans don't like change, and there's risk that like hey, we changed price, and it created this kind of gross benefit, but then we churned these users, so we ended up it kind of zeroed out. So this was like basically a big waste of time. So that was in the back of my mind for sure. And I was like, oh shit, all right, here comes November. That's when all these Black Friday sales in our category exist. December is when these plans kind of transition to the new pricing scheme. When and how bad is the fallout going to be? And it was shocking that, and I kind of kept it, I guess, conservative here, but we actually improved retention, which was bananas. Like it's sub 1% churn now, which is just
I
crazy.
I think we need to take a pause there for the audience that's listening. Kale was so anxious that almost every night I would get a late night text about, dude, are we sure this is gonna work? Did we miss anything? And we improved our retention rates.
It was
That's how
crazy.
good of a job he's done. Like improves retention
Uh,
rates.
right on, right on. So I mean, happy days, right? So I think it was like, despite all this change, things were actually in terms of retention, which is the name of the game, stable. Not only stable, but they improved. So that was like a
Hmm.
wink from the SaaS gods. And then 80% approval from our user base for, again, that what we just mentioned, that first real substantive product release. And the roadmap is locked and loaded, baby, for through Q2 24. So we've got just like in terms of being able to switch channels between like a planning state into an execution state, and avoiding getting into execution and then going back to planning and then trying to switch from, it's like,
Hmm.
boom, this thing is locked and loaded. Everybody heads down. Let's execute our brains out. So the runway is clear and very defined. And that's a great feeling. And then that's
Yep.
another one too, right? I mean, it's like, it's kind of like that tendency for artists before like their big opening, or you drop an album and it's like, man, I hope people like it. Like, I hope people like it. And I
Yep.
was definitely nervous because I had my fingerprints all over the product. And so and I told you, like, those first couple surveys came back like 1 out of 4, 1 out of 4. And I was like,
Yep.
oh
Who
shit.
did
And
we
then
miss? Oh.
I was like, oh no, 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 not great. But we ended up at 80%. So that was a huge win. And then, I think what's awesome too, and I don't want to throw too many numbers out, but if we're talking about momentum, which momentum is your best friend unless it's working against you, and changing momentum is so hard, right? I mean, you have kind of the image in your head of pushing the snowball up the hill, and it's like, damn, and your
Yep.
foot slips and the snowball rolls back a little bit, and then you
Yep.
get back to pushing. But man, all of a sudden you realize that, like, shit, we're at the top of the hill, and now it's a little bit downhill, and the
Hmm.
snowball is just getting bigger by itself. And so momentum is just absolutely beautiful. And so if we look at trailing 12-month growth in 2022, we took possession of the business in March, so call it Q2 of 23. So if we look at the prior year in 2022, both in terms of average month over month MRR growth as a dollar value, and then of course, obviously as a percentage, we're both negative. So now we are firmly in the positive zone. And I think what's more exciting is that we're increasingly positive month over month. So all things kind of indicate momentum has shifted. We've maybe got some tailwinds. The hill is at a slight decline, but let's go. Amen.
I I also want to add to this. This is more of a qualitative metric. Our users, they feel as though they're more behind us. When we took over the business,
Totally.
the Facebook group felt more like it was more personal support. There was a lot of complaining, and it just wasn't the place to be complaining. And then once we released the knowledge base and started getting support tickets in a formal way, a lot of those tickets felt like complaints too. But now it's more thoughtful questions on, hey, how do I actually do something? We started having our studio spotlights. Our user engagement went up from there too. Our visitors sessions, and our trial sign-ups went up from that too. So overall, the momentum is now kicking in, and it feels like we finally got the users behind us as the new
A
owners.
100%. And totally, I mean, and that setup is totally typical, right? Where it's like, it's a hostile setup, honestly. It's like you come in there like, yo, the new owner, are you going to gut the product? Are you some cold-blooded ass private equity dude that's going to cut costs and,
Hmm.
like R&D and innovation in the product's going to come to a standstill and you're just going to slowly kind of bleed this brick, until it's dry. And so I think,
Right.
obviously it's always been our intention, obviously as a function of what we're doing right now, but generally building in public, it's like, yo, here's the product roadmap. This is what it looks and feels like. Where's your feedback? Cool. We're going to release on this date. Here you go. What's the feedback? So I think,
Yep.
show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. And when that first product release dropped, it was like, hey, we're here. We mean business and we're going to make this thing better for everybody. So to your point, it shifted like, oh, shit. Okay. Well, I do have some feedback for it. And
Yeah.
oh my God. And this is super useful. And then when you see that
This is
manifest
great.
in the metrics, right, where usage goes up and
Yep.
all that other kind of stuff, it's a method to the madness. That feedback loop is where it's at. Um,
Absolutely.
all right, so those were the highlights. So I guess just to recap real quick, grew MRR and ARPU pretty significantly, double-digit growth on average in both. We generated 20K in free cash as a function of annual pricing. Retention stayed steady Eddie and actually improved. Our users love the new product release, 80% approval, and we're starting to feel some tailwinds. Happy days, Q4 23, man. God bless. That was solid. Yeah, there it is. All right, so now let's actually step in and let's peep some charts. Um, so the first one, let me do this. All right, let's do. Hopefully this works. I'm trying to think how I want to do this. Well, let's just run with this. All right. Cool. So we should be seeing, and can I bounce between these? Yes, I can. Beautiful. All right. So what are we looking at here? So this is a very dialed analytics dash that K-Lou the Wiz whipped up. And so, if we're looking at by the numbers, and the big caveat here, and sorry, this is a disclaimer, is that when we bought the business, it was in the kind of ninth inning of a transition from a legacy billing system to Stripe. And Stripe is like gospel. It is as close to like it is the greatestly most trusted source of truth for revenue under the sun. Behind that is bank accounts and tax filings, right? Where it's like
So
what kind of business,
QuickBooks.
what kind of sales, what kind of revenue is coming into the business. And so we had a
Yep.
transition to a new payment system, and this chart is underpinned. So this chart goes Stripe into Profit Well into Data Box. So there's a few layers of
Hmm.
complexity here. What's misleading is that we have not organically grown MRR from 15.8 in August up to 19.2. We had a huge kind of critical mass of users that were still on the historical billing system and hadn't converted to Stripe yet, and most of that was a function because they had buying kind of these ad hoc bundles of months, which is a no-no in our category. You want to be selling monthly and you want to be selling annual plans. When you start to sell 6, 7 month, 8 month, 12 month, 15 month prepaid subscriptions that are kind of their own terms, don't have structured renewals, all of the kind of predictability and the endurance of those revenue streams comes into question, and of course that translates into valuation and into multiple. So we want, simply put, you want shit in Stripe and you want it to be consistent and you want it ASAP because that's kind of the North Star for what revenue is looking like. Um,
Yep.
but generally speaking, MR is looking healthy, really solid increase. And I think here's where we start to see some other stuff. So ARR year to date, we're landing at 231K. ARR per contributor, which we're going to start to spend a lot more time on this. I think that this is the North Star metric for Micro SaaS, where it's basically what we miss on swinging for larger businesses where the outcomes can potentially be bigger, we make up on because we can run with lighter, leaner teams that generate more ARR or MRR per human than any
Hmm.
business in any kind of context. So we can basically we can make up in volume for what we lack in kind of gross, I guess, throughput. So simply put, like,
I
why
like
just
that.
go play traditional lower middle market buyouts? It's like, well, no, because we can acquire 5 micro SaaS companies and run them more quickly and efficiently than we can one $10 million business. So let's do that, and let's move faster, and let's juice the returns. So anyway, so that's
Boom.
that. And if we look at it on an adjusted basis, which I think is important, and this is kind of my personal craftsmanship here, so some data viz for you, but this is now adjusting for who cares if they're getting billed via Stripe or the legacy OG system? Who cares how many prepaid months they have? We've kind of amortized that into structured, consistent MRR. And what you can see is like, yes, there's still kind of structural decline. And this goes back to 22, January of 2 years ago. It's crazy. 22 was 2 years ago. And here's when we took ownership of the business. And so it was like, okay, there's still kind of structural decline in MRR. And then boom, we recoup with a lot of the pricing and monetization. So we're back kind of in a good spot. What's important from here, right, is that we have to get back to tried and true organic growth. So we have our work
Yeah.
cut out for us, and we'll elaborate on that. From a revenue perspective, though, you can see like a really healthy reversal in momentum, right?
Yeah.
So when we took the business, it
That's
was
what we
like
needed to see.
just in steady decline, and then okay, interesting in terms of month over month revenue. We're seeing good structural incline, and then bam, annual plans, some other stuff. A lot of the tactics that we disclosed come in to really save the day. So I think this is a great story. I think the business, is in a place now where we can be super proud about our performance and about kind of inputs and outputs, cause and effect. But we still have our work cut out for us. Anything on adjusted MRR or top line revenue?
No, just a lot of work to maintain the new bar that we've set.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. All right, cool. So now we're going to shift gears and talk core performance metrics. So we look at new visitor sessions, we look at trial signups, we look at new paying users, and we look at churned users. So this is, for all intents and purposes, a representation of our funnel. Some things that we're missing activation, like of the people who sign up for a trial, how many achieve the activation metrics. That's kind of a hallmark of product-led growth. That's stuff that's coming soon. But what I can say for sure, new visitor sign up sessions, and if you kind of recall some of the stuff that we've disclosed earlier, we've got our always on, totally established. I'm loving our operating model for content. It's just tech driven. It's the distribution is incredible. The leverage that it creates is amazing. It's probably one of the most time effective or least time intense skill activities that's generating a lot of our results. But we haven't really seen a structural incline in our new visitor sessions. Would you agree with that, Kev?
I would agree with that.
Because I
There's
mean, the
still
trend
more
line
to be
is,
done.
yeah, we got to get March out of here because that's when we got Google Analytics going. So it skewed the shit out of our trend line. But our trend lines
Right.
should be down the middle. It's like, hey, you guys are doing, call it 1,400 new visitor sessions a month. What we did, and then so that calls into kind of question, okay, then what do trial signups look like, right? And so trial signups, I think we have seen a really nice structural increase where, up until this point, we were averaging mid 30s. And then in October, and we're just looking at October, November, December, obviously January's, a third baked. But October, we had 61, November 43, December 40. So our Q4 average, I think, was 48 trial signups. And I think the story that's not totally told here, and we can bounce to it real quick, this is our weekly scorecard, but we've seen huge increases because it's basically like, okay, traffic, and sorry to bounce around, traffic to the site stayed generally the same, but your trial signups went up. And so that implies better quality traffic to the
Right.
website, right? Or to our marketing website. And then that leads into the trial flow and then into the application.
Yep.
So if we look over here, Google search engine, which we've been hustling our asses off on the content side, huge increases in the source being Google search.
Yep.
Also, our blog and social media is starting to really work for us, which is basically just a distribution channel for the same content that we're generating through the blog. And then we've got our ambassadors starting to work for us. These metrics were even more interesting, but all to say the quality of our traffic has improved a lot, and that's manifesting in our trial signups. The challenge is that we haven't managed, despite better quality traffic and better quality trial signups, we haven't managed to improve our new paying users, which should kind of follow rationally. And that calls into question, what's our onboarding flow look like? What do our activation metrics look like? Which is all stuff that we're going to be focusing on. And then, of course, we've got our and I thought this was good too. I mean, our year to date or 12-month trailing 12 months trial, and this is still cooking, but our 12-month trailing trial to paid conversions were about 4.5%. And it's just a bummer that this just updated, but it was floating around 7.5%, 8%. So it's like,
Mm.
ooh, like you're not seeing crazy lift in your new paying users, but damn, the trial to paid conversion is improving. The challenge is that, because trial signups, I guess we just think about the divisor and the dividend, right? Like we're putting a lot more volume through. So when that new paying users come through, it's a smaller percentage, but still the actual conversion rate is improving, which is very difficult and I think kind of promising indication of where things are going. Lastly, churn. Dude, trailing 30 is 0.69% churn, which is bananas.
That's great.
So the product utility is there. It's sticky as it's ever been. And that is all good. We're going a million miles an hour. Anything to add there, Kev? Anything like, oh
No,
shit?
no. Oh shit, you covered on everything.
All right, beautiful. All right, so now let's dive into actual OKRs. So we looked at what are the achievements for the year. Cool. Let's actually look at the KPIs and the performance metrics. How are we starting to see kind of those metrics evolve over time? What signals does that show us, and how does that inform our
Yep.
activities accordingly? Again, this is going to be a reflective exercise. But and I don't want to spend too much time here. I think if this is an interesting thing to understand more about how we think about OKRs, how we break objectives into key results, I definitely encourage you to take your time and kind of pour over this in the written cut. But we
Hmm.
want a new pricing model to boost MRR 15%. And this was really, I mean, God, and there were a lot of key results. A lot of these key results kind of bleed into tasks, honestly. And the reason for that is that we have kind of cross-function visibility into basically every activity that's going into, generating the objective and achieving the results. So again, that's where we can kind of index towards more transparency, more cross-functional collaboration, because there's fewer heads and kind of psychology to manage, alignment to generate, et cetera. But it was like, all right, we need to firstly go into this world and figure out what the new pricing design is going to be. And I went so deep on this in a million cuts, but this was feature matrices, perceived value of features, feature bundling, usage-based metrics, value metrics. Again, you can get a PhD in pricing. And there's a reason for that, because this shit is deep and wide. And then we were like, all right, we have this kind of thesis around a new pricing scheme. What's the user impact? Like, what percentage of users are going to move, and what's the dollar impact to them? What's the break even point, right? Where it's like, hey, we roll this out, it's going to generate this kind of improvement in MRR. But, what's that churn sensitivity where it all of a sudden zeroes out? So it's like, hey, we can change pricing. It's going to grow MRR by $1,000, but we're going to churn users worth $1,000. So we might as well not waste our time. We're going to zero out. Let's just skip it. And kind of trying to, again, manage towards scenarios and avoid what would be a total, kind of burnout, slide out outcome there. And then we did competitive audits. We identified the transition pains. There was a ton of operations involved with Stripe and product backend and the website and how that stuff's conveyed. And then there's a ton of communication to users. So this is like, you got to tell any audience, 4 times more than you think you should to cut through that attention barrier. And pricing is obviously a sensitive thing, so you want to over communicate. And then you got to be
Yep.
preemptive on, what questions are we going to get? What kind of templates can we spin up for support? What kind of content can we create to proactively channel traffic towards, scalable stuff like content versus playing whack-a-mole with support tickets? So all to say, we gave ourselves 3 out of 4 star. Oh, Kev, you like those? I went with stars instead of 3 out of 4, man.
Yeah, I saw that. I like that.
It's sexy, right? Oh man, the emojis,
Yeah.
baby, watch out. Um,
Next time we'll use
so
fire emojis.
yeah, we could totally use, but we need a hollow fire flame. That might be tricky. We'll just do a sad face. Three fires and one sad face. So anyway, we landed at plus 2K MRR, so it was about 10% MRR improvement. So we missed our goal. That said, pricing is standardized across. Like we had, I think there were 16 pricing plans in play. That some of them went back to like 2005. I shit you know, it might have been 2015, but whatever. It was insane.
Yeah,
So people who'd
2015, it
been
was nuts. Actually,
like
no, you're
grandfather,
right. Someone back to like 08, 09, 2010, and I was like, what is this?
like not great. That is the bottom line. Like not great at all. So we sorted for that, and we got that. So that's standardized. We generated 20K in free cash flow, as we mentioned, and there was no increase in churn. So I mean, I think this was like, damn, this is a win. Like we can put this. This is a W.
100%.
But I think there was some learning lessons, and I think failure is the greatest teacher. So it's hard to extract a ton of learning. But I think for us, as we look forward, we didn't allocate enough time toward user validation. Like there was some messaging stuff that created confusion. There were some concerns around the value metric, like the users had different interpretations of what that thing was and how to use it, which reduced
Right.
usage, which could have really screwed us hard, honestly. And then I think more generally, if we zoom back, I mean, when do we want to be looking, or when do we want to establish a point of view on pricing? Like, I guess how effective it is, how, like, just even if it's a scale of 1 to 4, like, 1, this is totally screwed up, we got to fix it, to 4, like, it's okay. I guess now, when would you want to establish that point of view after an acquisition?
Almost immediately, either during the process of acquiring the business or immediately as you walk in the door. We want to understand, how are we pricing our users? How are we making money today?
And it was like, hey, like, we'll get to this. We'll get to this. And then it was like, okay, this is this quarter. And there's this forcing function, which is this Black Friday thing, which all the users have a ton of muscle memory around, making purchasing decisions. And it was
Yeah.
like a hurry up and then rush. I'm sorry. It was like, let's take our time and then let's rush. And so I don't know. I just think, like, on the most macro, our sequencing was off. And then if we actually put it in the context of a quarter, we didn't bake enough kind of observation validation into the OKR.
Right. Yeah. I will say, in all fairness, in the beginning, there was a lot of competing priorities, and one of the biggest competing priority was, how are we going to support the users with the team that was leaving versus us coming in, between the Facebook group, setting up a support channel. We had to figure that out immediately, or else that would have led to more churn than putting off pricing. So you gotta be
Totally.
careful in discerning how you split that atom. And if you could split swim lanes in understanding, okay, well, this team, if we can really focus in on pricing while some other individual contributors focus in on the other competing priorities, then maybe that's a good way to go about it. But just discern how you split that atom before you truly hurt the business.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And that was one. And obviously, this is a good thing to, I guess you should be able to get there during diligence, right? Where it's like, hey,
Right.
I just want to see users by distribution of pricing plan. And it's like, holy shit, there are 30 plans. That's weird, right? Like, there's probably
Okay.
only 3, 4, or
Let's
5
prioritize
plans.
this.
Yeah. Or it's like, hey, dude, like, just underline that one in red. Like, we need to focus on that. All right. So now
Like we did
switching
with the
gears
sticky
to,
notes on the glass. That one's a big red sticky note at the top.
this one is like red. Just get your red marker out. All right. Objective 2, new global components, which was our big feature release, earns an 80% user approval. We spanked it. I think the cool part here too, and I think, and it depends on the maturity of the business and the maturity of kind of your transformation plan, but the holy grail is turning OKRs into repeatable systems. So for us, we basically were able to generate a product release playbook as a function of this first kind of real substantive release. So that was kind of the last OKR. And I'll spare you, we actually did a deep dive on this one, so I'll spare you some of the nuance there. But we got 4 out of 4 on this one. I was a little more generous than you were, but I think we stuck the thing, like we hit 80%. So I think execution wise, it's hard to argue.
Right.
Though I think the big lesson for me, again, and it's so fun, like the thing that we're still feeling out is velocity, operating velocity. And that's kind of the crux of our entire thesis and why we're playing the Micro SaaS game.
Yeah.
Like, we stuck the OKR, but it was like, I keep telling myself, like, take your time, dude.
Yeah, we
Take
need
your, like,
more time for observation periods. That's what we keep falling behind on.
and just generally, like, don't rush just because you think that speed is the number one thing that everybody's measuring you against. I think that is
Right.
to a degree accurate, but we want to be, performance creates or focus creates a space for performance, and he who chases 2 hares often catches none. So we want to be fixated in our approach. But for this one, that's a quote from Snatch.
I
Great,
like
great film.
that.
All right, but I think for this one, it was like, yo, we need more slack between our release dates, like internal deadlines, which is like, is this feature ready? And then we have some period of QA. Bless you. And then we
Thank you.
move into the release date that we socialize with our users, which is, that's how you manage expectations. You got to do it,
Yep.
because the tendency with roadmap is like, oh, hey, by the way, it's going to be released at some point. It's on the roadmap, which is this pixie dust thing that doesn't exist. So we're trying to differentiate that way and be transparent and build in public. But you want to bake in slack, because QA curveball city. So it's like, oh shit, we just found this thing, and it's going to take us a week to fix. It's like, oh, but we're supposed to release on Friday. We're supposed to release on Friday. And it's like, well, we're not. And now you have to backpedal with users, and that's just a bad look. So anyway,
Yeah.
we'll leave it at that. On to objective number 3, execute UGC tactical experiment. So this one, and we did a deep dive on this, so I will keep this kind of punchy. We did rock the second webinar. I loved the RICE framework. What a beautifully
It's been
simple
working.
thing.
It's working, baby.
It's been working for us. So I was really grateful about the rigor and just kind of like the framework led thinking, if you will, and adhering to the framework. Because the tendency is to deviate. It's like, okay, well, this is this, and it's like, no, this is our framework for doing shit like this. Get back to the thing and fixate on the framework and try to remove as much subjectivity and variance in thinking as you possibly can. So I thought we did a
Hmm.
great job. The snag here was that we didn't execute the actual UGC campaign, which was going to be a user spotlight, because we were kind of inundated with the pricing rollout and stuff like that. So I gave us a 3 out of 4 in that we did all the blocking and tackling. We have a good point of view. We know how to kind of pull that lever, but we didn't pull it. And I think the only other piece that was on the reflection diagnosis front was that we could have, like, I think we did a good job kind of identifying the landscape, like mapping the territory, if you will. And that was useful today too, where it's like, what's the entire universe of tactics or options that are available to us? Cool. Now let's run them through a framework and let's establish an objective winner. Uh, we did that, but I think we could have gone deeper once we determined a tactic to be like, all right, who's the most savage human being? Like, who's the Mandalorian in studio spotlights? Like, what's the
Mm.
shit they're doing? Like, what are the tactics? What's bleeding edge? Where's the attention arbitrage, et cetera? So I think we could have gone deeper there. And I think we could have very quickly, studied competitor failures, where it's like, and obviously you want to fixate on users over competitors. That's a OG Bezoism. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Anything to add from your side, Ken?
Coming back to that time factor.
Yeah, totally. Back or just doing too much for the sake of doing more. All right. Y1 pacing. All right, so this is our Y1 goal. So and I'm going to rattle this stuff up. Sorry for the listeners. This is probably not going to be the most fun to follow, but so in our first year of ownership, we want to grow revenue to 265K. So that's about a 12%, and that manifests. And remember, revenue is different from MRR, as annual pricing plans will tell you or will
Yep.
show you. So revenue is like a target. Hey, are we making this thing generate more top line? Great. Year over year MRR growth, that's like structural, predictable growth that carries into the future. We wanted to see a 12% improvement there. We, as a dollar value, that's adding 2.4K MRR to the business. If we translate that down into average month over month MRR growth, it's about 0.63%. We wanted to keep
Hmm.
churn sub 1.5%, and then we get into some measurables. So these are less quantitative, more kind of qualitative attributes, but we wanted stable support and engineering functions, centralized visibility across business functions. We want always on marketing capabilities, and we want 2x ambassador UGC, user generated piece of content per month, which that's pacing crazily. We want our product UI UX refresh designed and underway, and we want our
Yep.
first growth lever executed, aka pricing and monetization. So I'm just going to talk about, I think, the vast majority of measurables we've stuck, which is happy days. We've got a quarter of grace there. So I think we could have potentially been a little more aggressive with that. But we have, or maybe those were a little bit misguided because the qualitatives aren't necessarily translating to the quantitatives. So in terms of revenue, we're sitting at 230K right now, right? Which gives us, call it a 35K revenue target for the last quarter. And the business on average has been putting up 15K in revenue, again, not MRR per month. So that should be, I think it's kind of highly predictable that we'll generate 45K in Q1, which is going to get us to our target for a year one hold. So happy days. That's looking good. Now the picture changes a little bit. Well, I guess let's also say churn. Churn is awesome. Yay. Happy days.
Yay.
Yay. When it comes to year over year MRR growth, so we grew MRR, as we alluded to, 2K via pricing, but we yanked that lever, baby. And that lever takes a year to reset before you can yank it again. So now we've got our work cut out for us. We got to generate ballpark 1.5K of organic MRR, and we got to do that by acquiring new users. So assuming a $41 average revenue per month, or average
Hmm.
revenue per user, which is per month, that means we got about 36 new paying users we need to acquire in this quarter, and we've averaged like 3 per month. So our average per quarter is like 9. So we need like a 4, 5, 6x improvement to our new user acquisition. All to say, we need to giddy the, and I'll just say it, fuck up on improving the onboarding experience to basically improve that trial to paid conversion, because it doesn't matter. We could drive all the traffic and generate all these new trial users we want if we're not converting them to paid in an efficient manner, which per the benchmarks, Kyle Poye just did a good thing on PLG benchmarks for free trials. And we want to be landing in like the 20 to 30% trial to paid conversion of the group that achieves activation. So it's probably closer to like 10. I guess it's not, our trial to paid isn't actually that terrible when you think about it that way. But anywho, we need to fix onboarding, and we need to figure out some predictable coin operated tactic that when we put $1 in, it generates X trial signups.
Yep.
Because right now, SEO, aka all of our content and blog and social media stuff, and our
It's not
ambassador
predictable enough.
program is not predictable. It's nice, it's there, it exists, it's always on. But in moments like this, we can't just go, let's just do a bunch of blog posts. It's like, or
Right.
let's just beg our ambassadors to send some leads our way, or let's incentivize the shit out of our ambassadors. That stuff is all, there's too much out of our control. So targeted, outbound, in some capacity, some type of, intentful outbound acquisition thing to drive trial users is the name of our game. And then lastly, in terms of month over month MRR growth. So we're averaging right now 0.28% after 3 quarters, steering the ship. So we need to basically we need to average 1% in Q1 to 24. So that's about a 4X improvement. So I think there's no shot that we can generate this level of improvement in 1 quarter. I think we can establish the capability to
Right.
start to achieve those. And so that's where you start to distinguish from an OKR perspective, like, kind of capability building and foundation setting to then execute, and then to have an observation period that allows you to see if you're achieving the results that you set out to achieve.
And that observation period is typically going to be the second quarter after you've had a chance to effectively build the foundation.
100%. So our draft Q1 24 objectives, we'll just run through these real quick. We just hammered it, but objective number 1 is implement a segment-based modern onboarding to set the foundation for improved trial to conversions. Right now, we're currently at 5%. We want to test cold outbound, and we ran cold outbound through a RICE framework, and that emerges the tactic that is the most favorable for what we're trying to do. But we want to test cold outbound to generate predictable increase in trial signups. Objective 3, we want to maintain product release momentum, and it's like keep the product relevant, solve for the weird shit that upsets users. And the whole thing there is to keep retention sub 1.5%. And then our last objective is tinkering, I guess, so to speak, with content and social. And it's like, hey, if we 2X our content and our social output, is that generate 25% more, site visitors and therefore trial signups? So we want to see how correlated inputs and outputs are for the content and social game. It's pretty solid.
That is pretty solid. And once again, we do have our work cut out for us.
Yeah, we totally do. And I think it's basically going to
Yeah.
be like, fix this stuff for a quarter, fix onboarding, keep the product release stuff ripping, get our tooling
Yep.
ironed out for cold outbound, start to feel good about inputs and outputs there. And when Q2 comes, go as hard as humanly possible at outbound, and then kind of get through the remainder of the product roadmap, which is not going to be nearly as substantive as the stuff coming out this quarter. And then Q3 and Q4. And I know I keep saying this, but at long last, my friend, I don't think there will be any vegetables left on our plate to eat. At that point, it is dessert. Let's grow this thing. Let's do what we do. Let's have fun.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And for the sales nerds out there, get ready for Q2. It's going to be nothing but outbound sales tactics coming at you.
Yes. Well, and I think also too, like if you can bring an outbound skill set to, and I guess the assumption here is the SaaS, because I think product led, it's very hard to find a product that grows itself as a function of using the product, like
Right.
DocuSign, right? Where it's like, oh shit, you want to sign the document? Cool. Oh, what did I just use to sign the document? Cool. I'm going to start using that. Like this baked in virality with the product is so rare. So I think I'm increasingly coming to find that, the only thing I care about is user led onboarding. If users can onboard themselves into the product, I don't care if the product grows itself. We just bring like a sales led growth skill set to that equation. And I think there's a huge opportunity in Micro SaaS to come with OG. And it depends on your context, but a lot of these SMB folks aren't getting hit over the head like enterprise buyers are with emails and LinkedIn ads and all that other kind of shit. So it's like, all right,
Right.
let's go hard at SLG. Let's get users to the website, get them jazzed about a trial, and then ideally they can onboard themselves. That's an interesting recipe, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, it all comes down to the perception of value. If perception is reality, then let's get the user to identifying that perception of value based on their desired outcome. And if we can hit that, bing, the bing, the bing, effectively, I think we have a winning formula.
No doubt. No doubt. All right. It was just, well, I guess we should probably wrap. But final thought, I was listening to Invest Like the Best, which is the absolute greatest podcast. And Michael Ovitz, who is the founder of CAA, Creative Artist Agents, Agency, CAA, creative artist agency, like the most notorious talent agency in the entire world, out of Cali. His book's outstanding, and he was basically like, talent plus capital plus distribution is the most
Mm,
universally applicable recipe for success. So that one kind of knocked me off my chair. I've been thinking a lot about it. So here we go. We got the talent, we got the capital. Now let's iron out, and we got the product to a place where it's in great shape as a function of talent and capital. Now let's get distribution sorted out, and we should
right.
sail off into the sunset.
All right, perfect. Everything short of a publicist.
That's it. That's it. And an agent. I guess we'll need a talent agent in there somewhere.
Right.
Well, Kay Lou, man, much love. A pleasure rolling with you, obviously. Thank you for jumping on, talking through this with us. And I'll see you next week. Yeah, we got a deal teardown.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Deal to down for next week. So until next week, may the SaaS gods bless us for the love of the
That's
game.
it. For the love of the game. Yeah. All right, my G. You have a great rest of the day. Cheers.
All right, you too. Take care.